So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, viewers and listeners. Globespan 24/7. I am your moderator and host tonight, and we are discussing tonight two very important and relevant topics. One, the Code of Conduct for Government Officials in Guyana, and secondly, which a lot of people may have greater interest in, the ruling by the International Court of Justice on the Guyana-Venezuela border issue. And with us tonight to discuss these two very important topics are two most distinguished gentlemen. Both served in Guyana's national parliament for decades. I don't know exactly how many decades, but decades for sure. One served quite a long time as a government minister, and the other one the Speaker of the House. And so let me introduce them. And they really don't need any introduction. Distinguished Speaker, the Honorable Ralph Ramkarran, Senior Counsel, and Mr. Carl Greenidge, who served as minister in various capacities, foreign affairs as well as finance. So, gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for spending your time with us this evening. And let's begin right away. I don't know who I will ask first, but I'll go with the speaker. He seems a bit older than you, Carl. So I'll go with the speaker first. To tell us a little, introduce us this whole issue about the border controversy with Venezuela, and both of you are au fait with the issues involved, the border controversy with Venezuela. And what is this court decision all about? What does it really mean? Because there are quite a number of letters in the media expressing different opinions about the meaning of the court's ruling. So, Mr. Ramkarran?
Well, the most recent developments were that the United Nations Secretary General referred the matter to the International Court of Justice on the ground that the parties could not arrive at an agreement. Article 4 of the Geneva Agreement allows him to do that, to make a choice as to a means of settlement. And Guyana was pressing, of course, for a referral to the International Court of Justice after going through decades of a good officer process, which is a kind of, not really, but a kind of mediation process. And to no avail, it did not work. So the Secretary General, after a last effort, referred the matter to the court, and Guyana presented its case. And the first issue the court dealt with was the issue of jurisdiction, because Venezuela, while not appearing, met the court, met the judges, and delivered a letter claiming, and has always claimed, that the court did not have jurisdiction, so the court had to settle that issue. And the court ruled in our favor. The issue in the Geneva Agreement has always been a controversy arising out of Venezuela's contention that the 1899 award was null and void. And after the decision, Dr. Ramkarran wrote a letter in the press saying that alleging that the court has created an additional issue, that is to say, the land boundary. Well, you've seen some letters in the press. It is a misreading of the decision by Dr. Ramkarran. The court did not create a new and separate issue as to the land boundary. But the 1899 award deals with the land boundary. The 1899 award fixed the boundaries between the two countries. So if the 1899 award is null and is found to be null and void, it has implications for the land boundary. If it is found to be the opposite, to be not null and void, to be a valid agreement, then it has nothing to do with the land. It does not affect the land boundary. Now that is exactly what the court is saying. That's the decision. And unfortunately, Dr. Ramkarran misconstrued it and created a lot of misapprehension in Guyana, fortunately. I replied to it, and others have replied to it.
Mr. Greenidge, if you could go a little further backwards, how did this dispute come about? I mean, what is this controversy all about? What is this border dispute all about?
Well, thank you very much once again, and to yourself and the listeners. And I'm happy to be here with colleague Ralph. The dispute arose from an attempt by the Venezuelans beginning in the 1850s to get agreement with the British over what is Guyana's western frontier. But at that time, the dispute actually had nothing to do with Venezuela, with Essequibo. Let me make it very, very clear. The dispute turned upon the British presence and expansion on the Orinoco River and control of the Orinoco Delta, which is a major commercial artery. It still remains so today. If you look at the dynamics of maritime movements across the world, you will see this is one of the most important areas for shipping and the movement of freight and so forth. The Venezuelans got the US to put pressure on the Britons, and Britain agreed, first of all, in the Treaty of 1897 that they will go to arbitration. And they went to arbitration. Council has already explained that. And it was followed by the demarcation of the boundaries on the ground. And it follows from those boundaries other things, such as the maritime side, which I don't want to go to yet. But in 1962, the Venezuelans, in an attempt to prevent us from being granted independence, objected at the UN, saying that they did not recognize the validity of the 1899 award. That's the heart of the problem. And the question of the validity was dealt with by the Geneva Agreement of 1966, which agreement says, look, there is not a dispute. The two sides agreed to call it a controversy. The significance of that word was that the two sides had a judicial settlement of the matter, and now one side was saying, well, they're not sure. So the use of the term controversy was to enable them to have dialogue so that Venezuela, for example, could have access to British records, which would solve some of the doubts or questions they had. And this was done. There was a mixed commission afterwards. And I'm going to jump again. The Venezuelans attempted in 2015 to put pressure on the Guyana government after the discovery of petroleum, and we went to the UN. The government of President Ramkarran first wrote to the UN, late 2014. President Granger wrote again in 2015, and it was the new administration which was summoned by the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, to come and discuss this matter. And it is important to understand, and for the very reason that Ralph was mentioning just now, the letter by Dr. Ramkarran, that is that the Secretary General agreed that this was actually a legal issue. In other words, if you are a party to a court or a judicial or juridical settlement, and you take the benefits that the court awards, so the court says split this thing 40-20 or 40-80 rather, you take your 40%, and then you come back 63 years later and say, you know something, I didn't get enough. That means that the treaty is, or the arbitral award is null and void. You can't, as a beneficiary or as a party, as far as I understand, determine that it is null and void. And so the Secretary General tried to solve that matter by using, urging further dialogue. And we had a period of further dialogue. And since that got absolutely and unquestionably nowhere, he settled, and I'm doing some violence to the details here, he settled for a process called enhanced mediation, which followed the period that Ralph made reference to just now. Enhanced mediation. The Venezuelans agreed to that process, just as they agreed in 1966 under the Geneva Agreement that as a last resort or as an option, the Secretary General could choose the court. And that is exactly what the Secretary General did, because Mr. Doug Newlander, Ambassador Doug Newlander, after over 2 years of working with Guyana and Venezuela, could not narrow the gap, which is the language used in the initiative put forward to us by Secretary General Gutierrez, following his discussion and agreement with Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and therefore it was decided that this matter should be referred to the court. And that's how it came to the court. And the important thing here is that all the other peaceful options that make sense have been exhausted. And without the court choosing to take on an examination of this issue, Guyana and Venezuela have no peaceful way of solving this problem. Because if two parties have a dispute and one party has decided, as Venezuela has done, to write into its constitution that the matter at issue that lies behind the dispute over the if you like, the controversy over the arbitral award cannot be touched, can't be changed, then you have no place to go. And that is really where we are. And that was the decision put to the court, not a decision as to whether more land or less land should be given to Venezuela. The question is the Treaty of 1899 still valid? Has anything been done to upset that? But the court, in its normal processes, as again pointed out by Councillor Ramkarran, had first to decide on the jurisdiction, whether they had jurisdiction to consider this issue. So that is how we got there.
So the court says it has jurisdiction, but it has jurisdiction, it's not clear. And Mr. Ramkarran, I don't know if you could clarify that. It has jurisdiction to do what? To hear what?
Well, it has jurisdiction to determine whether the 1899 arbitral award is valid or not. That's the jurisdiction it has. It did mention that there is a related issue, that is to say the land boundary, but it did not say in any way, shape, or form that it had any jurisdiction over the land boundary. It had jurisdiction to determine whether the 1899 arbitral award is null and void.
But the 1898 award established the boundaries, didn't it?
Yes, that is why they referred in the judgment several spots to the related question of the boundary. You can't escape from the boundary. You can't write it out of the picture, because the 1899 award relates to the boundary between Guyana and Venezuela.
So where do we go from here? Because Venezuela says it will not recognize the court in hearing this matter.
Well, Carl is an experienced diplomat and will be able to say where we will go. But what I can say is that the fact that Venezuela says they will not recognize the court, that doesn't mean anything, you know. It is if the court rules in favor of Guyana, that is to say that the award is that the 1899 award is a valid award, then Guyana has law on its side, a law of the International Commission of Jurists, the United Nations. The International Commission of Jurists is an instrument of the United Nations. So we have the United Nations on our side.
Yes, if I might
Yes,
follow Ralph up there, I agree with him entirely. I mean, you can't on the one hand say that the court may decide on whether or not the treaty is valid, and the court having decided, for example, that it's valid, that the boundaries which the court has set are now to be revisited by somebody else. The decision that the court took was in relation to the borders, to the boundaries, and what the court is saying, if I might, is that we will decide on the validity when the time comes to deal with that phase, and that will have implications because there is a nexus between the validity and the boundaries that you have. And you asked about the question of non-recognition. The court, according to Venezuela, is not recognized by Venezuela, but that has not stopped the court saying that it has jurisdiction. So that's the first thing to note. And it says that whilst Venezuela didn't recognize its jurisdiction, its decision on jurisdiction is final. It is for it to make the decision, not for Venezuela to say, well, you know, we didn't recognize your power, so although you've pronounced on jurisdiction, we don't think you have jurisdiction. They don't have that choice. They don't have that option. And you ask about the steps. I will address it now because I think we have moved to a point where it might be helpful to explain this, because everybody gets, you know, excited about this. Supposing Venezuela does not accept the court's decision, that is something down the line. What I would say to you is that in recent years, the court's decisions have been increasingly implemented, whilst they may have started off not implemented. And as Ralph was saying, of course, the key story here is that the court is part of an international mechanism of international law, and it is part of the UN mechanism, and that UN mechanism has within it a General Assembly which makes decisions and enforces decisions taken by the General Assembly, and the court's decisions are recognized by the General Assembly and ultimately also by the Security Council. So we have that option, and in a sense, if you get too worried about that aspect of what goes beyond the court decision, there are other steps that can be had. And may I remind you that the Secretary General, in writing us about his decision to refer the matter to the court, did offer the services of the UN and of the SG himself. So the point I'd like to make is that we've been looking at, and I've done a note of this for the newspapers, that this is a multi-stage process. You're looking at one of many stages. The exclusively legal phase is this one we've just had, and the next one is exclusively legal. But if it is not entirely satisfactory, there is another phase which involves, of course, the work by the diplomatic and legal and negotiators on the other steps to deal with any problems not resolved.
So what's the next step? I mean, when is the next hearing by the court?
Well, the court, if I might, Ralph, the court is in the process of notifying us as regards the meetings that they hold on case management, as you know, arising from the events of the last 9 months or so. This is now familiar territory to the average Guyanese, where the judges have a look at timing. They tell this side or ask, what period do you need to prepare your case? They ask the other side, then they opt for a period. The two sides are given, I believe, equal periods, and then the court will set out arrangements that say after you will have presented your memorials, we will ask you some questions, and you are in a position to answer some questions that might have arisen from the other side, and then the justices themselves will deliberate and come back. Now, we don't know how long they will take. We don't yet know how long they will allocate to the countries, and we are not sure that Venezuela, or whether Venezuela will participate at that stage too. So it's difficult to say exactly how long that process will take. But you ask what is to happen, that is what is to happen. You will have the case you'll have the case management meeting in early February, and subsequently you are going to have the court select a time for the beginning of presentations, depending on how long they give each side, and then the process will unfold from there on.
Mr. Ramkarran, any further comments on that?
No, I think I agree with that course. That is what is likely to happen.
And given past experience, this would be a couple of years?
At least.
It will take time, yes. These things are not finished quickly.
Last week I was doing something on the last 20 cases of the court, the cases since 2000. And although you have the Chile Peru case, which took 13 years from the submission to the decision, the average time span between filing and the decision of the court is 4.9 years. Okay? I noticed that the newspapers have attributed to me a different period, but that you have to remember was said a long time ago, and also that we've already started. 2.5 years have passed since we filed. So you have some time to go, and it'll depend on whether Venezuela participates.
Okay, any further discussion on this board? I think there is ample clarification of the issues involved. Mr. Ramkarran, any?
Yeah, no, I think we've covered it.
Okay, right. So if we can move on now to the second issue that we wish to discuss tonight, which is Code of Conduct for Good Governance in Guyana. So I was just wondering if I could ask you, gentlemen, first, if you could define what is your concept, your understanding of Code of Conduct, what it should be, and good governance in Guyana. Mr. Ramkarran first, him being a lawyer.
Well, people have to behave in a certain way, generally speaking. There are codes of conduct. What triggered my interest in the matter? The matter has always been in the forefront of politics in Guyana. The last government talked about it, and I think President Greenidge had said that there was a code of conduct, but I think he mentioned that Mr. Trotman had drafted. I'm not too sure, but it was never published. Now, what triggered my interest was that the Home Affairs Minister in the United Kingdom, Ms. Priti Patel, was alleged to have been rude.
I think it was bullying actually, is perhaps the more serious part.
Yeah, bullying to her staff. And there was a report, and that report said that she had violated, the report found that she had violated the Code of Conduct by bullying her staff. And then that sent me to the Code of Conduct of the United Kingdom. What Prime Minister Johnson did was he did not do was to discipline her, as a result of which his advisor on ethics, governance, and
ethics
resigned as a result of it. Now, the Code of Conduct is quite extensive. Unfortunately, it is not enforceable by law. Now, it's not, when you read the Code of Conduct, it is nothing that is objectionable. There is nothing in it that would normally be objectionable to anyone. And I don't understand why it is that Guyana does not have a Code of Conduct, 1, 2, that is not published, and 3, that is not legally enforceable. Now, you may remember some years ago, many years ago, when Bas Deopande was the Prime Minister of Trinidad, the Integrity Commission reported him for having a foreign bank account. Trinidad law provided that you could not have a foreign bank account. He had his foreign bank account, he was reported, he was charged by the police, and he was convicted. And we unfortunately do not have an Integrity Commission that has any teeth. You know, when I was Speaker of the House, I submitted for 10 or 11 years, I had to submit my returns. When you are late, the staff of the Integrity Commission would call me frantically and said, "Mr. Ramkarran, we haven't received your report," but nothing happens. I would ask, "What are you going to do with it? When you get my report, what will you do with it?" Nothing ever happens because the Integrity Commission in Guyana has no clout, no power to do anything with these reports. They have no investigative power. So I'm linking the two. Guyana is going to become a very wealthy country very soon. There is great possibility that in terms of procurement and contracting, there is great possibility that a lot of things can happen which are not fully legal, are not fully ethical, are not fully proper. And look, I mean, let's face it, our ministers are generally, from my perspective, not Carl, but from my perspective, are younger,
I wonder what's coming here.
are younger people. And they do not have the experience of things like conflict of interest and all of these things. For them to find what conflict of interest is, they don't have a code of conduct to look at it. They have to find it in some book somewhere. They have to go to a library somewhere. And what are these young people going to do when faced with the possibility of hundreds of millions of US dollars they have to make decisions over? Who is going to guide them? So Guyana is at the time now, we're looking at local content. Carl is a part of that. We're looking at reforming the petroleum laws. We're looking at all kinds of developments relating to our petroleum industry. We have to look at immigration. We're going to have to look at a whole variety of things. When are we going to look at corruption? Corruption is an important thing for us to prevent. It's not that I'm not accusing anybody or I'm just saying to look at countries that have found oil. Look at countries. You can pick out the few countries that are doing well, Norway being one. But corruption is rife in oil-producing countries, and we need to take cognizance of that. And we need to understand that things like codes of conduct, enforceable, legally enforceable codes of conduct, need to be implemented. And our laws against bribery and corruption need to be implemented hurriedly. Not hurriedly in such a way that they're badly done, but hurriedly so that the Guyanese people are protected. I would like to be protected. I pay a lot of tax still, even though I don't earn as much as I used to.
You are a rarity.
I still pay a lot. It pains me. It pains me every quarter when I have to sign the check and pay tax. It pains me when I see that the tax is misused. So that is my argument. And I've been beating this drum for many years.
So, Carl, you want to amplify on that? Or
yes, I would like to add.
Disagree?
I would like to add some observations. I have no issue to pick with Ralph on what he said so far. If I might go back to the very beginning, the question you asked as to what it is, I would say that the code of conduct should address the behavior of officials. And let me deal with ministers. I leave the officials aside for the time being. I'm speaking essentially of the political leaders because this has implications. It is the heart of the corrosiveness of the system, the corrosion of the system. And if you don't deal with those, what a deputy accountant does, or a deputy PS does is largely irrelevant, because ministers have the power, and in Guyana they use the power to override the powers that PSs themselves have. I remind you that President Hoyt had, in concern over the behavior of ministers towards their public servants, written, I think, up to this point, the most authoritative note on the powers of ministers vis-a-vis the public servants. But the issue of a code of conduct is one that should seek to guide and constrain the behavior of those officials in their personal and in their official capacity. So it's not only about what they're doing in the office, not only what they do as Minister of Finance or whatever, but also in their personal capacities. You will recall that in the case of the UK, where 5 ministers have fallen victim to the code of conduct between 2005 and 2020, many of them have had to fall on their swords, as it were. They've been forced to resign as a result of actions taken in a personal capacity. And Ralph mentioned Priti Patel. In fact, she was forced to resign in 2017. We're speaking of what is a controversy now. This is 2020, but in 2017, she was forced to resign over another matter of her engaging in discussions with
the Israelis.
Yeah. In circumstances where such an interface was unauthorized. So that is one dimension. Behavior. There's a conflict of interest issue, which I'm afraid that I have drawn the conclusion a long time ago that Guyanese at the official level, whether it be ministers or public officials, seem to find this a notion that is foreign. We have a lot of difficulty recognizing conflict of interest and responding to that. The other dimension has to do with confidentiality and the abuse or misuse of information to which public officials, as I say, ministers and others, are subject. And then the other one, which is the one that's most contentious in Guyana, apart from the question of corruption, is the one of decision making. It has to do with decision making. Decision making should be transparent, and it should be non-discriminatory. And you've had, again, ministers in the UK system, since they published their code in 1992, a number of ministers falling victim to failing to embrace the standards set out in the code of conduct. I want to give you some examples because I think it's very important we understand what is at issue here. Ministers, a minister, I think, for example, lies to the House. Minister lies to the House. Damian Green was involved in a case where it was alleged that he had certain material of a particular nature on his computer, and he denied it in the House, and it was discovered that he lied, and he had to resign. Minister Mandelson, who is one of the most famous of the English ministers, he became a commissioner, resigned twice. Once for influencing a passport application for some foreigners who wanted passports, the Hinduja brothers, for example, that was one. And also, which Guyanese would, I think, find surprising, for taking a loan from a colleague, Minister Robinson. And the problem with that is that if you get a loan from a colleague minister and then you are in a position to influence the decisions of your ministry as regards the activities of that minister and his ministry, it is a conflict of interest. It's a potential conflict of interest. And what I'm saying is that one gets the impression when you look at what is happening in Guyana and the evolution of our values as they stand right now, that perhaps money comes above all. And that is why I suppose Ralph was giving such emphasis to corruption. I mean, if you take a case that you should be very much aware of, The traffic in Guyana is in a state that is really both disgraceful and a disaster. And the abuse of traffic rules, the ignoring of traffic codes and rules is a problem. And yet you will find, if you were to remonstrate with, for example, a minibus driver from Jamaica, because they seem now to be amongst the worst, or the ones that feel themselves least constrained, or a taxi driver from wherever, you know what they often will tell you? Can't you see I'm trying to make $1? As though that justifies everything. Trying to make $1 puts other people's lives at risk. It raises people's blood pressure. It causes accidents. And yet people feel justified in doing anything in such circumstances. And a lot of our people are prepared to condone that. And what I'm saying to you is that a lot of the people that talk to you about wanting to see codes of conduct are themselves perpetrators of some of the very things that the code seeks to prescribe. And the reason why is that many of them feel that somehow they're an exception, they're exception. So the conflict of interest really doesn't or shouldn't apply to me. I mean, when you take the cases I cited for you in terms of Mandelson and Company, in the British codes, they've set out 7 principles. You mustn't abuse the transport you've been given by the government. You should set about trying to ensure that all your actions in an official capacity are in the public interest. For example, you will realize that we, for the most part, not only fall far short of that, but the public often is not prepared to hold the feet of the officials to the fire in relation to areas such as that. So that is really what I would want to say. Impartiality, submitting yourself to scrutiny, transparency in decision-making, truthfulness, avoiding taking on obligations. You know, when you go to campaign, somebody would say to you, well, you know, in return for my contribution to the campaign, I want a license to open whatever it is, whether it is a quarry or to have a airline.
Or a gun license.
These are or a gun license. If you are going to hold the officials to those standards, the public themselves have to recognize and accept that those principles apply to members of the public too. And I sit here, I'm looking, for example, at a bit of paper in front of me about a campaign being waged in one of the elements of our media, and I ask myself, do the proprietors or the editors of that newspaper or radio conform to that principle? And you know very often what the answer is. I'm not going to say anymore.
All right. So just to remind our viewers or listeners, our audience, that we are watching Globespan 24/7, owned by Mr. Nohar Singh, and our technical host tonight is Mr. Devin Bissoon. So if I understand it right, code of conduct is not only applicable to ministers, because I noticed Minister Greenidge, former Minister Greenidge, has been stressing ministers, but it's across the board. Parliamentary secretaries, permanent secretaries, assistants to ministers, those who work in ministerial offices, office of the president. You're even saying that the public at large as well, and across the board, all officials of all regional councils and NDCs as well, because all of them should fall under this code of conduct. But we still haven't established.
But perhaps I could clarify. Can I just clarify that? What I would say to you is, in Guyana, we seem to merge all of them into one lump. That was what was happening when, for example, the previous government was looking at this. But what I'm saying isn't that the same hurdles, the same level of hurdle should apply to everyone. What I'm saying is everyone should respect the principles, those 7 or 10 principles that you embrace. It should apply to everyone. But in the case of a minister, it has not the enforcement, the standards that you hold them to should not be quite the same as those that you'd hold the secretary to, because the opportunities are different, the conflict of interest are not quite the same. And elsewhere, for example, British public servants, I speak about British because I'm more familiar with them, have standards and have a code that is somewhat different from those of a minister. A policeman would have different codes. We have tended to speak of one code, which is part of the reason why they tend to be so general, which is why Ralph was making reference to. I think the need is to ensure that certainly at the political level, you put one set of codes in place, and at the level of technicians or officials, you put a different set of codes in place, because they actually do different tasks, and perhaps we might find it more effective to police if it is done that way.
Mr. Ramkarran?
You know, when I was a young activist in the PPP, I distinctly remember
You're still young.
that we had a code of conduct. And I can't remember now, but I have a strong suspicion, a strong belief that I was the person who prepared that code of conduct. Now, this, of course, was a code of conduct that was completely different to any kind of code of conduct relating to public servants or ministers and so on, or people who serve the public, like the NDCs and the Regional Democratic Council members and that kind of thing. But the code of conduct is a well-established facility, a well-established instrument to regulate the behavior of people generally. For those who handle vast sums of money, for those who are liable to people to cause great harm unless they behave properly, it should be enforceable. Now, in the British Code of Conduct, it's not a mystery. It's not nothing is it's not difficult. I summarized it in the article that I wrote recently, and they said you must act solely in terms of the public interest, avoid obligation to organizations that may influence their work, do not act or take decisions in order to gain financial or material benefit from family or friends, declare and receive any interest in relationships, act and take decisions impartially, fairly, and on merit, using the best evidence and without discrimination or bias, and so on. They're more like that. So there is nothing mysterious about it. These are principles that we all good people strive to live by, and that should be observed by our leaders.
But you're saying it is not legislated, it's not law, and therefore it's not enforceable.
It's not enforceable. No, even in a country like the UK, all that happened was that the government advisor on ethics resigned. The prime minister suffered no political or other injury. Ms. Patel is still firmly in place.
No.
But she has been behaving herself, though.
Ralph, I wouldn't go all the way on that. You know, in Britain, I know that you are young enough to remember the Profumo scandal, for example, which had to do with the indiscretions of a minister, and that brought down the government. In Britain, as I said, 5 ministers were forced to resign. So the thing is, in the case of Mr. Priti Patel and the PS, who himself resigned, or he was the victim. It is that the prime minister chose not to enforce. But let me say that it isn't the absence of sanctions. It is that the prime minister here chose not to enforce. In Guyana, the thing is a lot worse, because whilst you have the Integrity Commission, and whilst people have views about wrongdoing being sanctioned, the thing is that in the end, one suspects that all the parties will end up with proposals in which the person or the official to take decisions about sanctions is the president. And this is part of our problem, that too many resolutions and decisions lie in the hands of the president. The president isn't the presidents aren't saints, and that means that often they are not prepared to take action against whether they be ministers or others. That's the case in Ghana. That's why not a single case of sanction has been implemented, let us say at least since 92, if they were implemented before. And when they are implemented, and I'm aware that in prior to 92 of ministers being removed for breaches that were not, if you like, things that they could be sent to the court for, they didn't make public the link between the action and the disposing of the minister or the requirement that the minister resign. So it's part of our weakness that is going to compound what you see in Britain, that everything is left to the president or all power is exercised by the president on behalf of the parties. That is the source of non-implementation.
Okay, so we'll resume after this break.
All From One Supplier is pleased to announce its online shipping for West Indian and American groceries. Order online at allfromonesupplier.com and with free shipping and deliveries to any part of the United States. Save time and energy to shop for all of your West Indian groceries from the safety of your home or office. We carry West Indian products like curry powders, meats and fish, dashing bush, pepper sauce, sodas, and your favorite snacks. All From One Supplier has it all. All From One Supplier fulfills and ships your order directly to you. So visit All From One Supplier today to start shopping or call All From One Supplier at 718-551-3292 to handle all of your West Indian grocery needs. That's All From One Supplier, 718-551-3292. Free shipping, free deliveries, or curbside pickup from allfromonesupplier.com. Travelspan has low fares on American Airlines, Eastern Airlines, Caribbean Airlines, and JetBlue. Let Travelspan shop and compare prices for all 4 airlines. Guyanese now have choices, so book your preferred airline through Travelspan. Call Travelspan at 718-845-0437 for the lowest deals between New York, Miami, and Guyana. That's Travelspan at 718-845-0437. From Miami to Guyana, rates are as low as $186 one-way and $417 round trip. Deals from New York to Guyana are as low as $191 one-way and $475 round trip. And Travelspan is also offering shop and ship. So if you cannot travel, you shop and Travelspan will ship all your items for you. So call Travelspan today in New York at 718-845-0437. In Georgetown, 227-1701. In Berbice, 337-4287. And in the West Coast Demerara, 269-0140. Travelspan has several offices to serve all your needs. So call Travelspan today.
So welcome back, viewers, listeners. I am Vishnu Bisram, and with me tonight discussing Code of Conduct in Guyana is two esteemed gentlemen, Mr. Ralph Ramkarran, Senior Counsel, former Speaker of the House, and former Minister of Government, currently advisor to the present government, Mr. Carl Greenidge. Gentlemen, thank you again for spending your evening with us. We were discussing Code of Conduct, and just before we went to the break, Mr. Greenidge was talking about punitive measures for violations of Code of Conduct. And still, officials in Guyana, ministers and others may not be clear about what is this Code of Conduct. And you did amplify several of them of how ministers should behave, what they should take into consideration. Mr. Ramkarran, you want to add anything to that Code of Conduct?
If a code of conduct which is not legally enforceable, like the one that you have in the UK, which requires
discretion
government ministers to behave in a certain way.
And when they don't do they resign when it's brought to their attention. They resign. I remember a few years back in which some ministers, in fact members of parliament, overstated their expenses in
Yes,
traveling expenses, and I believe virtually they had to repay, and I think virtually all of them were forced to resign.
Yeah.
correct. Correct.
Some ministers here resigned for mysterious reasons. But Dr. Ramkarran, you may remember, resigned as a result of an altercation, not a physical altercation, but a
Right,
verbal
a verbal altercation.
he
Yes.
had with a young lady. I don't recall her name at the moment.
Sure. Anyway, I forgot, but go ahead.
Charlena something.
Yes.
Charlena Najir.
There, that's her. Yes.
That's the name. And she complained bitterly. The thing was public, and he had to resign as a result of it. So that was the only case I know. But when it becomes egregious, like in the case of Dr. Ramkarran, steps are taken. But sometimes it doesn't reach that level. It reaches a level where steps can be taken, but it doesn't reach a level where public pressure is applied. In the case of Dr. Ramkarran, there was public outrage at his behavior, and that was what caused his forced his resignation. In many cases, there is no public outrage. So what can happen is that a code of conduct can be passed by the National Assembly and be required to be followed by ministers, dealing with ministers alone. And at some other time or soon thereafter or the same time, we can think about code of conduct for other officials, which will be different from those of ministers.
Anything else?
No, I agree with that. This is what I was suggesting. So I'm entirely in agreement with Ralph.
And so we have been focusing on code of conduct with regards to money, finance, but there is also code of conduct in other aspects of behavior as well. Besides bribery and so forth, earlier this year there was this issue about the general elections, in which some people felt that the officers of GCOM did not behave properly in their responsibilities and duties. So there should be a code of conduct for them as well, shouldn't there?
Well, there are laws. There are laws in relation to them. And in relation to Mr. Mingo, who was counting from paperwork other than the statements of poll. The law required him to count from the statements of poll. That matter was taken to court, and the court decided that he must count by the statements of poll. He didn't do it, but eventually it was rectified in some other way. Then those are the two most important complaints. The other important complaint was that Mr. Keith Lowenfield, was not following the directions given to him by the chairman of the Elections Commission, chairperson of the Elections Commission, chairwoman, in delivering the results in a certain way. The court eventually held that he is required to follow the instructions of the chairwoman. The words used and became popular was that he's not a lone ranger. The Chief Justice said he's not a lone ranger. So there are laws relating to some things. And in a judicial system that is functioning properly and fully, those laws would be upheld. And remember, we have now a Caribbean Court of Justice. So so if you have a case and you go to the Caribbean Court of Justice and they say, no, we don't agree with you, that's it, brother. We don't agree with you, but you can't. I mean, I have great confidence in the Caribbean Court of Justice. I've always promoted them, whether they agree with the view that I hold. I've criticized them in the newspaper. I remember I've criticized the CCJ on 2 occasions. On one occasion, a lawyer criticized me for criticizing them.
Yeah.
Mr.
Well,
Greenidge?
if you are going to protect yourself in the international arena, where you are simply what shall I call it? Where you simply plankton, a tiny state like Guyana with no particular set of powers. If you are not to find yourself victim completely at the mercy of the larger powers, you have to embrace the rule of law. And if you embrace the rule of law, you have to respect the decisions of your courts. And to the extent that there is scope for carrying those decisions, appealing those decisions, then you have to respect the bodies that oversee that. Caribbean Court of Justice is, in the context of the discussion we were having of the ICJ, it is absolutely essential for Guyana's protection. You can't be going to the ICJ and saying to the ICJ, look, Venezuela is seeking to bully us to deny the validity of a treaty, and then we hope that you will pronounce, and when they pronounce, you say, wonderful court, I love you, and so forth. But then in relation, even within the same period, be saying to or of the Caribbean Court of Justice, don't worry them, they're a set of foreigners, they don't matter, they don't represent us. It is not consistent, and it is not a line that you can defend. So it's part of a global superstructure, and we have to respect it, I'm afraid. However inconvenient the court's decisions may be, maybe sometimes it requires that you go and you write your laws better, more clearly. And obviously there is room for that. The point being made by Ralph about officials is correct. But where you find that actions may not be taken appropriately, it may also be that there's scope for making responsibilities a lot clearer, and for having remedies where a particular official may not have carried out their work. But these things exist in our system. These weaknesses exist. We have to recognize and fix them.
So both of you have stated that there are laws
Yes.
For the behavior and conduct of some officials, certain officials, certainly at GCOM. So why can't we have laws, for example, for the others, for members of parliament, for parliamentary secretaries, permanent secretaries, and other elected officials, non-elected officials who work for the government? What's preventing?
Well, you have a lawyer with us. I don't think he's saying there are no laws. If you as a policeman act inappropriately, it is possible for the Commission of Police to take action against you, for the Director of Public Prosecutions to take action against you, for members of the public to sue you in their private capacities. To the extent that, and I'm going to be wandering in dangerous ground here, to the extent that we have weaknesses in our system. The courts themselves may be weak. The police system, Ralph was making reference to poor pay, problems of inappropriate recruitment, inadequate recruitment, lack of proper channels of communication, interference where the policeman holds you up on the street and somebody calls. It isn't that there isn't a law that stops that. We are using, by and large, exactly the same laws that Barbados uses, for example, in most instances where the public interfaces with our officials, and many of which have been derived from Britain, and you will find sometimes in India, into the Caribbean. Our system has, in many respects, eroded over the years. So the judiciary itself has challenges, the police have challenges, bureaucracy itself have challenges, and I don't have to tell you that the political arena is not without challenges also. So one can't really point You can't point fingers, and I would urge that you don't see this problem as existing largely in the arena of officials, because it's not true. But we have to tighten up our system. That goes without saying, and enforce rules and make sure they're respected. But it requires that everything, in a sense, work at once, because otherwise you have loopholes. If the police are very efficient and the courts are not operating properly, court cases are piling up, people are not tried, judges don't write decisions, all of these things pose problems.
And all of those are problems.
All of them are problems.
Not only that, the public servants you were mentioning, I think you were specifically mentioning some public servants.
Yes.
The public service rules, the rule book.
Yes.
Is a very thick document. There are rules for the behavior of public servants.
Yes.
They're very, very, but you know, for a long number of years, our system, I work in the court system, in the public servant part of the court system. And I have not found in the court system the kind of problems that exist in other departments, like births and deaths, for example. That's a nightmare area. But we have problems, plenty problems, of course, but they're different kind of problems. So you have public service rules, and you have criminal laws that prevent people that keep people on the straight and narrow. They don't always observe it. And look, many years ago, when my father was a parliamentarian, a person came and said that police, he was just relating a story that the police stopped him. And I remember his name very well. He was a traffic chief by the name of Fredericks.
Yes, I know him.
You know of him. So, Fredericks himself, he would cross over not anything serious, he crossed over the yellow, in the middle of the road, went over the double yellow line or something. So Fredericks flagged him down and told him to report to the station tomorrow and charge him. So he was telling my father. My father called up, I can't remember, I know him so well, you call him a friend, but he was the Minister of Home Affairs on the Barnum. I think Hoyt fired him. He's from Plaisance, boy from Plaisance.
You mean Jeffrey Thomas?
Thomas. Called him up and said, you know this man, Frederick stopped this man. So I call his name. You know this man is my family? I said, okay. Okay, Comrade Ram, I'm going to look after it. Now, how do you stop those things in a country like that?
Yeah.
What rules do you make for those things? Stuff like that.
Indeed, the public service rules to which you refer, Ralph, have been most egregiously damaged by political interference over the years. It isn't that they don't exist.
I don't know if you can, to interrupt you, I don't know if you can recover a situation where a permanent secretary is like a permanent secretary of old. I've been thinking about it, and I don't know if that situation can ever be recovered. I don't know. It's gone too far. Permanent secretary just take instructions from ministers on matters that they shouldn't.
So just as a reminder, listeners, viewers are watching Globespan 24/7, owned by Mr. Noir Singh, and our technical host is Devin Bissoon. I am your host, Vishnu Bisram, and with me tonight are Mr. Carl Greenidge and Senior Counsel Ralph Ramkarran. Sorry, Mr. Greenidge, for interrupting. Go ahead.
I was going to venture a view that some of that weakness or situation that Ralph is identifying arises because the complementary institutions have also gone. Do you know? You know, of course, that ministers in our constitution are not entitled to simply, we talk about corruption, just to give you an idea. A minister should not be spending money. I often used to say to people where they come to me as Minister of Finance, that apart from Minister of Finance, who signs checks as Minister of Finance and authorizes the auditor and the accountant general and the PS, you as a minister should not be anywhere near dealing with buying and selling, spending, and so forth. But of course, the PS is the accounting officer for each of the ministries, and they handle or should be handling billions of dollars. But you know, if a PS is concerned for their survival and they believe that they are working for ministers that are not constrained or don't feel constrained by the law, then they will do as they're told in order to protect their jobs,
Of
whether it is
course.
to sign a check or to fire someone or to transfer someone. And the Public Service Commission, because it is appointed, again, it comes to my favorite hobby horse, that too many of these things are done at the discretion of a president. The reality is that the Public Service Commission members, if they know anything about rules, are themselves concerned to keep the political bosses happy. But in truth, we don't even go about appointing them to those bodies based upon any particular knowledge that we have. They are appointed to that body because they are representative or they're part of a particular institution. Sometimes they can come from anywhere within the institution and know nothing about the rules. They're appointed, and they just serve as scribes to do as they're told. And this is, if you look at the difference between, again, coming to the Caribbean, you look at the difference between Barbados and Guyana, you'll see that that is the case. It is the case. It applies even in relation to boards. I remember whilst I was in Barbados, somebody being invited to join a board, and the person immediately called for the financial responsibilities that they would have as a board member, and what it is that they would be liable to if the board was found to be negligent and so forth. We have boards and men do all sorts of things. No rules apply, no sanctions apply. So again, it's not only the government system, and this is going back to the point I was making about taxi driver. I see it's become open season in relation to some of the papers, for example, to decry and disparage and misrepresent politicians. Politicians are not people jettisoned into Guyana from Mars. They come from the populace. And if the populace has bad habits and it tolerates those bad habits, you're going to see them reflected in the politicians. This is the point I was making about the code, that if the taxi driver and the public as a whole believes, well, you know, you shouldn't be interrupting me because I'm trying to make $1, then you will find that people justify stealing state resources, denying the poor access to resources on grounds that they themselves need money. And this is part of our problem. Our public and the public's responsibility are not always recognized by the members themselves. You can't blame all the problems of a country onto politicians. Newspapers, newspaper owners, newspaper proprietors are also part of that problem. Okay, as are others. I'm not singling them out.
And the public as well. For example, when the public occupies state reserve and feel, well, why not?
And it is felt that it's their right. People say, what, you know, how harsh can you get? But when you occupy state reserves and put effluent into the waterways, you put all our health, the health of all citizens at risk. And people don't think far enough down the line that there are rules, and some rules are intended to protect us as members of the public from individual actions that are dangerous to the global or collective health.
Senior counsel.
Yes, well, what can one disagree with? I believe that we are going to get the resources soon, and I hope that those resources are going to be used to restore what we have lost in Guyana. That is things like the independence of the public service, the ministerial responsibilities, follow them properly.
Probity in office.
Probability in life, yeah.
Procurement, the procurement system to work to work work effectively and efficiently. Um, our infrastructural work to be properly monitored. We need independent monitoring of our infrastructure. Roads break up, as you know now,
Hmm.
less than half the time that they're supposed to last. And who are monitoring the work of the contractors? The same people who created the system, who prepare the estimates and all this kind of thing. I remember doing a case, it's still current, so I can't call names, where a road was put out to tender, and one well-known contractor tendered a sum that was lower than the engineer's estimate, far lower. Uh, well, this contractor is known for doing that, and during the construction phase, the variations would build them up to very high sums. So there was a professional report made that this sum cannot build this road. It's insufficient, it's far too low, the bid is too low, and it should be rejected.
Hmm.
And the contractor went to the court and asked the court to change the award because he was the lowest bidder, you know. The matter hasn't concluded yet, but that is the kind of thing we get, the kind of things we need to stop.
But variation have been subjected to abuse. Really, it has been. I mean, I don't know of any contract that was done within the actual bid in Guyana.
Yeah, that is true, but variations, there's a way to manipulate the variations along with the engineer.
Yeah. That's
So
it.
it's a whole,
Public Accounts Committee reports on this all the time.
it's a
Okay.
scheme.
I like to come back on that subject, but just in case we run out of time, we only have about 16, 17 minutes left. A viewer sent in a question, and I suppose both of you can answer, but I direct it first to Ralph because it has to do with Parliament, and that is these non-voting members of Parliament. In this case, it would be Ms. Walrand and Ashni Singh, and I don't know, would we have 4 ministers, technical ministers who don't have voting power?
Or, yeah, junior and senior.
And so how does this work if there is a vote and you have 32-1? What does that mean? That's what is. I mean, I know the answer, but I leave it to you. What does that mean?
Parliament is presently constituted of 33 members for the government and 32 for the opposition, counting Mr. Schuman with the opposition. He's not in government, so he's counted with the opposition. Whether he votes for them or not, I don't know what he will do. So there are 65 members. The PVP has a majority of 1. Walrand and Ashni Singh and whoever else, they don't vote. They have no voice. They can speak but not vote.
Whatever the circumstances.
There was an attempt when I was speaker to get a technocrat member who shall remain nameless to vote. He said that he can't vote in Parliament, but he can vote in committee. There's a big problem. and then there was a document prepared for guidance on the standing orders, document prepared by the then government for guidance on the standing orders. And this document contained this provision that a technocrat member can vote in committee. So I rejected the document and said, this thing has to be changed. And I was away somewhere, and I wasn't in the presiding, and Mr. Nandalal presided on my behalf. And the document was put in the parliament and passed. And I asked him, do you know what you did? He said, no. I said, well, this is what you did. You, well, as soon as in 2015, was 2015, the government changed in 2015, yes. Yeah. In 2015, as soon as the government changed, they just throw the document. I reported it to Rupert Rupnarain, Minister Rupert Rupnarain, and he ensured that the document didn't see the light of day.
I will just go for a break again, and we'll come right back.
But he did it.
We'll just go for a quick break, and we'll come right back. You're watching Globespan 24/7.
Globespan 24/7 continues. All from One Supplier is pleased to announce its online shipping for West Indian and American groceries. Order online at allfromOneSupplier.com and with free shipping and deliveries to any part of the United States. Save time and energy to shop for all of your West Indian groceries from the safety of your home or office. We carry West Indian products like curry powders, meats and fish, dashing bush, pepper sauce, sodas, and your favorite snacks. All from One Supplier has it all. All from One Supplier fulfills and ships your order directly to you. So visit All from One Supplier today to start shopping, or call All from One Supplier at 718-551-3292 to handle all of your West Indian grocery needs. That's All from One Supplier, 718-551-3292. Free shipping, free deliveries, or curbside pickup from allfromonesupplier.com.
Okay, so welcome back again, viewers, listeners. You are watching Globespan 24/7. This is Vishnu Bisram. I'm your moderator. Devin Bisoon is our technical host. With us tonight is the esteemed gentleman, Mr. Carl Greenidge, former minister, and Mr. Ralph Ramkarran, former Speaker of the National Assembly. So, gentlemen, in about 10 minutes we have left. If I could indulge you, we have identified so many issues and problems with regards to good governance or code of conduct. What can be done to improve code of conduct? What do you see as the main challenge now to implementing some of the things that you suggested and advised?
Well, like everything else, we have to things that we want, we have to fight for. You know, I have been fighting.
And who is this we?
People like myself.
Okay.
Who are capable of speaking publicly. Some people can't speak publicly because of their jobs and for other reasons. So, you know, both the government and the opposition now say that they want inclusive governance. The PBP had campaigned for shared governance up to 1992, up to 1991, 92. It stopped after 92. The PNC had agreed, Hoyt had declared in 2002, I think, 2003, declared for shared governance.
Mm-hmm.
The last government declared shared governance and a specific system proposal set out in its manifesto It didn't happen. Now, both parties have walked back. They have said that they support inclusive governance. Now, people like me who have fought for shit, we just have to continue talking, continue putting forward these views, continue fighting for what we want, continue fighting for the code of conduct. When the government does something, we must accept it, say thank you, congratulate them, urge these things be supported. And other than that, we continue the public campaign for what we want. That's how things are done everywhere.
Mr. Greenidge?
Yeah, I think that as individuals of influence, of course, as Ralph is suggesting, we can make our opinions heard and press. Where you are, even as is an old story that gets me into trouble with my own party members sometimes. You are a member of well, even beyond them, you are a member of a political party. It's your right also and responsibility to go and press your party leadership to do the things that are right. It's not for others. You are in a party, whether you're in opposition or you're in government, you use your presence, you attend the meetings, you listen to the debates and the discussions, you participate and call for these things. If the party membership of the PPP is calling for it, the PPP members will have to take note. The PPP leadership will have to take notice. If the opposition members, when they have meetings, and there are fora where these decisions can be taken, in the case of the PNC, well, the APN using the party. In the case of the PNC, it has its meetings. You have a central exec, but at the level of the ordinary member, you have a general council and you have Congress, and their resolutions may be put. You may put resolutions to the meeting. The highest forum for making those decisions is the Congress, which is a wide meeting that has representatives from all parts of the country, and they can call upon the leadership to do all the things they want. If it is a code of conduct, if it's the enforcement of codes when they're in place, if it is even the respecting of ethical behavior by the leadership of the party. You know, we speak about sexual harassment. It's a major problem. Sexual violence is a major problem in our society today. And in a party like the PNC, the bulk of your foot soldiers are women. I'm not saying they alone must press, but they can use their influence in these bodies to make sure that the leadership takes note, and it is for the responsible men also to do it. So we all have spaces. You can also be a member of a church, you're a member of the private sector commission, you're a member of the trade unions. Use your weight in all of these bodies to pursue your goals. It isn't, you know, there's a tendency in Guyana now, I think our grandparents didn't see it that way, where people will approach you and say, whether it is Comrade or it is Mr. Greenidge, why don't you get the leadership to do A, B, or D, or whatever? And I would often say to them, well, I will try, but you must also do your part, because you are in a workplace, you are in a union, you are in a party. Make sure they know your views. And if it is not on the agenda, you call upon them to put it on the agenda. That's how you get change, not by sitting back and hoping that the people of influence alone will see reason, because often they have vested interest in staying right where we are.
But there is fear. I mean, everyone has fear in bringing up these issues, fear of victimization and
Well, a lot,
other.
both of these parties, the PVP more than the PNC, I think, has been affected by democratic centralism.
Yes.
So that the voice of the people at the bottom have been kind of not, I wouldn't say silenced, but most of the decision making happens at the top and it's sent down. And that culture, I think, has affected the PPP very significantly. And I think, you know, many people in the leadership of the PPP has kind of grown up with the culture. I'm not saying that they deliberately may have taken advantage of it, but they have grown up with that culture. They've grown up in that way, and they make decisions in that way. So all of that, we have a far way to go. All of these things need to be changed, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but you have members of the party, supporters of the party, who always come up to the leadership. Look, Chief, I have this problem. Can you help me with it? And so they themselves are encouraging a violation of code of conduct, rules, principles. Or what does the leadership do? If I don't do it, I lose some
Do
support.
you think in our ethnic situation they will lose any votes? So do they have to listen to somebody if they don't want to?
And
Well,
and, and I haven't.
I don't think the public is that intolerant. Yes, it is true, and I'm thinking of a certain very prominent gentleman whose daughter accosted me at the airport and gave me a blessing, as my grandmother would say, for not responding to a request that they had made, she and her husband, for certain things. But by and large, the average member of the public, I think if you explain to them, look, Chief, yes, I'm the minister, or I'm the permanent secretary, but I work within certain rules. I can't go outside of these boundaries. I think people, by and large, would understand. Of course, it depends on the issue, it depends on the person. It also depends on how you put it to them. But it is your responsibility as a leader not to allow yourself to be abused. If people respect you and they claim to be your supporters, they're not going to invite you to do things that will land you in jail or will blemish your name. So I think you also have to be able to persuade them and to speak to them properly. And maybe sometimes, very often I find that the requests made to you, if you are in a position of influence in the government, uh, where the request is made to you and it may be outrageous. Sometimes it is outrageous because they don't understand the system. There may be a way to get what they want legally and properly, and I think it is up to you to ensure that you say to them, look, uh, there's a better way of doing this. It will take time, but it is a legal way, and you should use it. If you need an introduction to somebody so that they can assist you to complete the form or whatever, I'm prepared to do it. But when you start, we have people here whose favorite story is when they get through and they're able to influence you 4 or 5 times, they see you passing on the road and they say, that's my boy. Come, that's my boy. Meaning that they got you at their fingertips. And we, I think, often forget that. For somebody to come and say to me, or to say of me, because I assisted them improperly, well, that's my boy, I could get him to do anything. It is not a flattering thing. And we need to realize that that's how a lot of people behave, especially men. They're very proud to tell people, he's all right. I got him under control.
So we just got about a minute left. Any last point, Mr. Ramkarran?
Well, I think the two main issues we discussed, the very divergent issues. One is the Venezuela issue, and the other one is the code of conduct. I think that both are important topics, especially for this Christmas season. I'm glad we were given the opportunity of speaking about the Venezuela matter, because it clarified, especially for the diaspora, which I think you attract a lot.
It does.
From the diaspora, and it's clear that Dr. Ramkarran is a very, the person who has a big name. He worked at the United Nations,
Geneva and so on. Yeah.
Yes, so in a lot of high positions, and he's very close to. I'm sure he had relations with the last government, as he's had with this government. So people listen to him, and I'm glad we clarified that. I'm glad we were able to talk about the code of conduct and its relationship to corruption, bad behavior and corruption, and so on. It's a good program, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Mr. Greenidge?
I endorse that entirely. And
Well,
I'm
again, I
happy
want
to
to, on behalf of Mr. Nohar Singh and Mr. Devin Bissoon, I just want to thank the two of you again for taking your very, very precious time away from your family and this very close period of Christmas. And so let me just take this opportunity to wish you and your family a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year to discuss other matters or even a follow up on this ICJ matter as well. So again, you have been watching Globespan 24/7. Vishnu Bisram here, your moderator. Nohar Singh is the owner of the TV, and Devin Bissoon is the technical assistant. Thank you again, gentlemen, and
thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the evening.
the same to you.